Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Mem Tes, Daf 149 of Masechta Shabbis. Overview. So, we had said in the Mishnah that you are not allowed to read a guest list from if you had written it down. You can't read it from a list. You can kind of just say it from by heart. The question is why not? We are going to discuss that. Are you allowed to look into a mirror on Shabbos? Are you allowed to look at artwork, at murals, ever? Now friends, yesterday we learned Hanach li Yisrael, mutav shu shogegin v'al yu mezidin. Friends, if you don't want to know the answer, you're welcome to turn off Babylon Talmud right now. Then we talked about lots on Shabbos. Like can you have like lottery kind of things on Shabbos? And some agadata about Nebuchadnezzar. So, if you choose to continue with us for today's daf, you'll be able to learn about some interesting and somewhat strange agadatas about Nebuchadnezzar. Friends, let's get started. Kuf Mem Ches Amud Beis, about 4 lines from the bottom, all the way to the end of the line. Mishnah. Mona Adam es orchosav vespar brosav. Oh, I guess we didn't learn that yet. We're learning that now. So a person is allowed to count his guests and count the amount of food that he has, the portions of food that he has. Or Rashi says mine ma'adanim, types of treats. But okay. Mipiv, he's allowed to do it by peh, he's allowed to do it by heart. Avalom and aksav, but not if it's written down. So if he's having Reuven and Shimon and Levi over for lunch, and he wrote down on Friday that Reuven and Shimon and Levi are coming for lunch, and now it's Shabbos, and he's trying to remember who did he invite, he shouldn't look at his written list. And we're going to, the Gemara is going to discuss why not. Mapis Adam im banav vim bnei beso ala shulchan. V'vachali iskaven laisus mana gedola keneged mana ketana. Interesting. So I guess a fun activity for the Shabbos table could be to draw lots to see which piece of chicken you get. And whichever lot you get, that determines what you're going to have for lunch. Sounds very fun. As long as all of the portions are equal. You don't want somebody getting more and somebody getting less. Okay, fine. Sounds fun. Now, in the Beis HaMikdash, they would have lots for kodshim, I guess to decide who gets which part of the animal, I guess. But not on the manos, and the Gemara will explain what that means. Friends, top of Kuf Mem Tes Amud Aleph in the Gemara. My taima. So how come you are not allowed to read from the guest list on Shabbos? What's the concern? What's the worst that can happen? Here's the worst that can happen. Rav Beivai Omar Gzer Shem Yimchok, Abai Omar Gzer Shem Yikra B'Shitrei Hedjotis. Rav Beivai's concern is that, well, let's say your list says that Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are coming for lunch, but you realize that you did not exactly prepare enough food to feed 3 people. So what you might do is you might go to your list, erase, let's say, Reuven from the list, before giving the list to your attendant to, the attendant would go invite the people. So meaning, you'd have a list of the people essentially who you want to invite to come for lunch. Now, if whoever's on the list, his servant is going to go and knock on their door and say, hey, you're invited for lunch. So if he realizes that he didn't make enough food for everybody on the list, he's going to erase some of the people so that the servant won't go and invite those people. So meaning on Shabbos. So that is Rav Beivai's concern. Rav Beivai's concern is that if his mom is reading from the list, if there's not enough food, he might erase people on the list so that they won't be asked to come. Whereas Abai's concern is that, well, if you're reading from lists, you might end up reading from Shitrei Hedjotis. You might read from sort of just documents, not exactly Shabbos-dika documents. I don't know what kind of documents you'd be reading, but not Shabbos documents. So because we don't want you reading non-holy documents, so don't read from your guest list on Shabbos either, so you don't come to read from Shitrei Hedjotis. My benaya, what's an afkamina? What is a situation where, one of either a Beivai or a Abai would say that it's okay, and the other one would say it's not? Like, what's the practical difference between the two? What's a situation where the differences matter? Iga benai, here's the difference. The kasav akosel umidale. The difference is, what if you wrote down the guest list on the wall? And not only did you write down the guest list on the wall, you wrote that list very high up on the wall. Now, if it's very high up on the wall, you're not gonna climb all the way up there in order to erase it. So therefore, erasing is essentially a non-issue, yet you still might then avert your gaze from the list and go read Shtaria Jotis. So according to Abaye, it will still be a problem out of concern of reading Shtaria Jotis. According to Rebbeivai, it's no problem because you're not going to erase the list. Let's read it inside. Lemanda Amar Shema Yimchok Lo Chashinon. So according to Rebbeivai, who was concerned about erasing the people from the list, that's not a concern if the list is very high up on the wall. Lemanda Amar Shema Yikra Chashinon. However, according to Abaye, whose concern is that you might read from the list and then go read from different documents, so that is still an issue. Okay? But one second. According to Rebbeivai, okay, I understand that if the list is high enough on the wall that you're not going to erase it, but why not be concerned about Abaye's concern? Why not be concerned that somebody then might go read Shtaria Jotis? Visu, and more so, wait a second, the Shema Yimchok Lo Chashinon? But even so, Rebbeivai, just because it's high up on the wall, is that really a reason to say that we don't have to be concerned about erasing it? V'atnan, but we learn in the Mishnah, Daf Yud Aleph Mud Aleph, Lo Yikra L'or Haner, or was it Yud Aleph Mud Beis? No, Yud Aleph Mud Aleph, Lo Yikra L'or Haner, that you may not read to the light of a candle. V'amar Rabba, and Rabba said, Afilu Gavoa Shtei Komos, even if that candle is 2 stories above you. Afilu Gavoa Shtei Mardaos, even if that candle is 2 ox goads higher than you are. Afilu Asara Batim Zel Gabe Zeh, even if there were 10 houses, one on top of the other, and that candle was on top of the top house. Meaning, Lo Yikra, right? Still you cannot read. Meaning, if the Chachamim said, do not read to the light of a candle, that is that. Don't come to me and say, but this candle is really far away from me. Don't matter. If the Chacham said that it's also, it's a low plug, we don't make any distinctions. And therefore, Rav Beivai, who's concerned about erasing the people from the list, well, even if the list is really high up on the wall, if there's an issue of erasing, no matter where that list is, it's still going to be usher to read from the list out of concern of erasing, even if you might make the argument that, well, in this case it's far away. It doesn't matter. Okay, well then back to the drawing board. Well then, both according to Beivai and according to Abaye, you would be unable to read from that list. Rav Beivai, because we still have the concern of erasing, and Abaye, because you might then go and read Shtaria Jotis. Ella, so the Gemara gives a different suggestion. Ike benayu dekasava kosel umitate. So rather, it's still written on the wall, but not high up on the wall, rather very low on the wall. Okay, so obviously we have to be concerned about erasing it, but maybe it's not an issue of Shtaria Jotis. So according to Beivai, who's concerned about erasing, certainly you're going to be concerned about erasing when the list is low down on the wall. However, according to Abaye, whose concern is that you might, after reading this list, go and read other documents, lo chayshinan. We're actually not concerned in this case because guda b'shtara lo mechlif. Because you're not going to, interchange a wall with a document. And therefore, you're not going to read something from the wall and then say, oh, let me go read some documents. That's not, I guess, psychologically that the person's not going to, go from one activity to the next. And therefore, in this case, when the writing is low enough down, so you have to be concerned about erasing, but you wouldn't have to be concerned about then proceeding to read documents. Ulamanda Amar Shema Yikra Lechu Shema Yimchok. But Abaye, I have a question for you. I understand that there's no concern for reading documents, right? Because you're not going to go from reading on the wall to reading documents. But why not be concerned about Rav Beivai's concern? Why not be concerned that the person might erase it? So Ella Ika Benayu Dechayek Atavla Ba'pinkas. Okay, so rather the Gemara says the issue is when so the nafkamina is going to be when you wrote the list on a board or on a tablet, but not just with ink. You mamish etched it into the tablet. So in that case, there's no issue of erasing. There's no issue of erasing because since it's etched into the tablet, it's going to be very difficult to erase. You're going to have to like mamish like etch it out. And while you're doing that, you're going to realize like, oh, oops, it's Shabbos. I really shouldn't be doing that. So therefore we're not really concerned about erasing, but we still are concerned that, once reading it from the tablet, you might then go read from documents. So according to Rav Bevai, we're not concerned that he's going to erase it because that would be very complicated to erase and he'll remember that it's Shabbos and he'll stop. However, according to Abaye, who says that we're concerned that after reading from the list, you might read from other documents, it's still a concern. But Rav Bevai, so I understand why there's no concern about erasing, but why not be concerned for Abaye's concern that you might reach Darei Adjotis? And then the Gemara says, that's not a good question because don't try to make the following argument, Rav Bevai. If you're going to try to say, well, Tavla Ufink is Bishtara Lo Michlef. If you're going to say, yeah, but if we're going to try to argue for Rav Bevai and say that we're not concerned that you're going to read from this tablet and then go read from other documents because that's not something that somebody does. Meaning we've argued that a person won't read from a wall and then go read from a document. That seems to be acceptable. So maybe Rav Bevai is going to want to argue that the same applies also to a tablet. If you have a tablet and you etched a list into it, so you're not then going to go, after reading the list from the tablet, and go read from Shitrei Chovos. Don't try to make that argument. How come? Because V'atanu, we have a brayso that says, Mona Adam kama mi bifnim v'kama mi b'chutz. A person is allowed to count how many people he's going to sit inside, how many people he's going to sit outside, v'chama manos asid la'aniach lifneim, and how many portions he's going to be giving to each person. Miksav shal gabe hakotel. Now he's allowed to read this from writing that's written on a wall. Avalo miksav shal gabe tavla ufinkas, but not from writing that is written on a board or a tablet. In heichidami, what is this writing on the wall that he's permitted to read from? If you're gonna say that it's written on the wall or on the tablet, well, that can't be. What's the difference if it's written on a wall or if it's written on a tablet? We should still be concerned that you're going to erase it. So Ella Lav Dechayik, it must be talking about where the writing is etched on the wall. Vikatani michtav shal gabe hakosel, avalo michtav shal gabe tavla ufinkas. Right, and we're saying that you're dafka allowed to read it from the wall, but not from the board of the tablet. Meaning, right, we're saying that a person is allowed to read from a list if it's etched into the wall. Because if it's etched into the wall, there's nothing to be concerned about, right? Because we're not concerned about erasing, because when you go to erase it, you remember that it's Shabbos because it takes so much effort to erase it. And in terms of Shitrei Hedjotis, we're not concerned, because you're not going to read it from the wall and then go read those other documents. But we're saying that it's specifically from the wall. But if it's on a tablet, then it won't be allowed. Now, according to a Bevai, why shouldn't it be allowed if it's on a tablet? We're not concerned about erasing, and we're also, if you want to make the argument that you're not then going to go from reading from the tablet to then go reading normal arguments, shtaros, well then Rav Bevai, what's the problem with reading from the tablet? Why does he specifically have to read from the wall? Rather, it must be that we are concerned that people will read from a tablet and then go read Shitrei Hedjotis. So, we wanted to say that a nafkamina between Rav Bevai and Abaye would be when you have a tablet and the list is etched into the tablet. And we wanted to say that according to Rav Bevai, we're not concerned about erasing anything because it'll take too much effort and you will remember that it's Shabbos. According to Abaye, we are concerned that you are going to read Shitrei Hedjotos. The question then was, but Rav Bevai, why not be concerned like Abaye is concerned, that you might then go to read Shitrei Hedjotos? So the Gemara goes back to its original answer. So really, the Gemara goes back to its original answer, that it's talking about where the list is written in ink on the wall, but it's very high up where it would be impractical to actually erase it. Now, I believe that I am understanding this part of the Gemara correctly. I looked it up in the Art Scroll. It wasn't super clear, but the mahalach I have makes sense, so I'm gonna go with it, okay? So basically, it totally makes sense. There's really nothing to be concerned about, other than the fact that it just wasn't clear that the mahalach that I'm gonna say is the correct mahalach, but it's not complicated or anything. It totally makes sense in my mind. So that is that, okay, so we go back to our original answer, which is that it's a list that is written on a wall, but super high up, okay? And therefore it's impractical to erase it. Now, Rav Bevai nonetheless maintains, like he said, like we wanted to say originally according to Rabbah, which is that it's a low plug. Rav Bevai is concerned about erasing, and it doesn't matter how high or low this list is, you will still be unable to, we still have to be concerned that you might erase it, and therefore you would be unable to read from this list, even though it's very high up and written on the wall very high up, you would be unable to read from it according to Rav Bevai because we're concerned about erasing. However, according to Abaye, since it's written on the wall, there's no concern that you are going to read from other shtaros, right? And then, just like we've been asking all along, well then be concerned for the other person. So Abaye, even though you're not going to read from shitrei adjotos, but shouldn't you be concerned for Rav Bevai that you might erase it? So Abaye says, no, it's too high up. You're not going to erase it. And therefore, Abaye is not concerned at all. He's not concerned about shitrei adjotos. He's also not concerned that you are going to erase it. Whereas, Rav Bevai says, no, you still have to be concerned about erasing even if it's super high up. Now, what does the Gemara say? But you'll say, but Abaye, how could you not be concerned about erasing it? What about Rabbah, who says that no matter how high this candle is, you still can't read next to it. So here also, no matter how high this writing is, you still have to be concerned about erasing it. The Rabbah Tanaihi. So the answer is that Rabbah is not accepted by everybody. It's actually machlokas Tanaim about whether or not you have to be concerned when something is not practical. Titania, as we learn in a brisa, Mone Adam es orcha vespar pirosav. A person is allowed to count his guests and count the food that he has, mipiv avalo min aksav, only if it's ba'al peh, but not if it is written down. Rav Acha matir miksav shal gabi hakotel. Now, Rav Acha, however, allows you to read from a list if the list is written on the wall. Now, heichidami, what is this list that's written on the wall? Now, if this list is written low down, well then certainly everybody would say that you have to be concerned about erasing it. Elalab, dikasav umidale, rather it must be that it's talking about a list that is very high up. So we see that it's actually a machlokas tanaim that Rabbi Acha would say that even though the list is very high, so Rav Acha will say that if the list is very high up, we don't have to be concerned about erasing any more. So therefore, Abaye is going to hold like Rabbi Acha and say, look, since the list is very high up, I don't have to be concerned about erasing, and because it's on a wall, I don't have to be concerned about reading shitrei hadjotos. According to Rav Bevai, however, he'll say, look, you still have to be concerned about erasing even if the list is very high up on the wall. All right, very exciting stuff. Now the Gemara says, Vani Tanai Kahani Tanai. Now these Tanaim are like these Tanaim, meaning this question about do you have to be concerned about a Gezerah D'Rabbanan in a case where it's really impractical for their Gezerah to be relevant, do you have to say lo plug, that we make no distinctions and, the rule is the rule no matter what, even if it's impractical? Or do we say that no, if at the end of the day you really don't, practically speaking, have to be concerned about this concern, well then we can waive it. So it's machlokas tanaim. The Tanis, we learn in the brisa, ein roin b'mara b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to look in a mirror on Shabbos, and that is that. Sorry friends, you'll have to wait till after Shabbos. Hopefully you look good. You know what? I'm sure you look good. You look great. Rabbi Meir matir b'mara kavua b'kosel. Whereas Rabbi Meir says, look, if the mirror is on the wall, well then there's nothing to be concerned about. Let's go weiter. Ma'ishna kavua b'kotel. What is the difference if it is on the wall? Is it because is it because when it's on the wall, if you look in the mirror and you see, I need to cut some hair, well then you might go get your scissors and cut your hair. Well, if it's on the wall, when you go to get your scissors, you'll remember on the way and you'll say, oops, it's Shabbos, I better not go and cut my hair. But she'eno kavua nami ada achi v'achi madkar. But even if the mirror is not on the wall, then we should still be concerned that while you go get your scissors, not concerned, meaning we should make the same thing, which is even if it's not connected to the wall still, while you go get your scissors, you'll remember that it's Shabbos and you won't cut your hair. So what's the difference if it's on the wall or not? So, the Gemara answers the difference is this, that we're talking about a mirror that is made out of metal. And it's like Rav Nachman says in the name of Rabbi Bar Avua, how come they said that a metal mirror is forbidden on Shabbos? Because you can actually use the mirror itself to cut hairs. Meaning, if you're looking in the mirror and you see that, some hairs are, out of place or whatever, so you can cut them with the mirror itself. And that is why we say that if the mirror is on the wall, so Rav Meir says, look, as long as the mirror is on the wall, it's going to be fine, because you're not going to cut your hair using a mirror that is attached to a wall. But if the mirror is detached and it's in your hand, well, then you might take it to cut the hairs. But the Chachamim, however, say lo plug. They say it makes no difference. We don't care if the mirror is on the wall. We don't care if the mirror is on your hand. You cannot look in a mirror on Shabbos because you might, because since there's a concern that you might come to cut hair, so it doesn't matter if it's in your hand, doesn't matter if it's on the wall, doesn't matter if there's, practically speaking, a real concern or not. If the halacha is, don't look in a mirror, the halacha is don't look in a mirror no matter what. Rav Meir, however, says, look, if it's on the wall, there's no concern, you can look in the mirror. Fine. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ksav hamahalech tachas atzur v'tachas adiyuknos. What if you have a mural? You have a mural, a painting on a wall, okay? Like the Last Supper. You have a painting on the wall, and it's either like the Last Supper, depicting some kind of event. So the Last Supper is, of course, Jesus' last meal, but Rashi doesn't use that as an example. He uses maybe David and Goliath, okay? Or some kind of maybe like a mural featuring some kind of interesting animal, okay? And underneath the mural there is a a caption describing what the mural is depicting, okay? So Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis talk, if you have a caption beneath a mural, also the cross of Shabbos, you're not allowed to read it on Shabbos because we're concerned that if you read the caption, you might read Shitra Idiotis. Fine. Udyukna atzma, and if you want to know about the actual mural itself, the actual painting itself, well, that you're never allowed to look at. Mishum shenemar, as the pasuk says, al tifnu ela elilim, do not turn towards idol worship. My tamuda, what is that? What does not turning to idol worship have to do with not looking at artwork? So Amr Rab Chanan, al tifnu el mada'atzchem, do not turn to things that come out of your own creativity, that come out of your own minds. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that really interesting? Where do you draw the line? How do you define creativity? Anything that comes out of your own mind. I mean, creativity is where it's at. I don't know. Meaning artwork is you have some vision that comes from your own mind and then you make it into reality by creating the artwork. But creativity is where it's at. I don't know. What do you want me to tell you? Let's go weiter. Mepis Adam im banav v'chulei. So, yeah, isn't that what makes humans different than like animals and stuff? That we have the ability to be creative? Intellectually, at least. Mabis Adam im banav v'chulei. A person the Mishnah says a person can make these lotteries for who gets which piece of chicken, as long as all the pieces of the chicken are the same size, okay? But if they're different sizes, then he's not allowed to. So im banav im bnei beiso in, v'im acher lo. So we're saying that he's allowed to make lots on Shabbos, make lotteries on Shabbos with his family. However, he's not allowed to do it with his friends. My taima, how come you can't make these lotteries with your friends? The Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, the Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, b'nei chabura amakpiden zeh al zeh. So if you have friends, but these friends are very suspicious of each other, and if they're going to be dividing up chicken, they want to make sure that nobody's chicken is bigger than the other person. Well, over mishum mido, mishum mishkal, mishum minyan, mishum loven uforin b'yamtiv. Uvdivrei Hillel af mishum ribis. Wow, let's go through that slowly. So these people who are very, makpid to make sure that everyone gets exactly the right size and nobody's getting more or less than anybody else, well then they're violating mishum mida in terms of measuring, mishum mishkal and weighing, mishum minyan and counting, mishum loven uforin biyamtiv in terms of lending and paying back, or loaning and paying back, and maybe even interest. I mean, these people are super makpid to make sure that nobody's getting any more or less than the other person. Well, inevitably, they're going to violate different things that you don't want to be doing on, Yom Tiv, but I guess probably also Shabbos, because they're very makbid. They're going to end up weighing things and counting things and things that shouldn't be done. So therefore, we say that friends, people sitting together who are very makbid, they should not be making these lots, because since these lots are for the exact amounts, well, they're going to end up like weighing things to make sure that nobody gets any more or any less. So, Yahachi, Banu v'nevei nami. Well, if that's the case, then why should it be any different for his family? If we're making sure that everybody gets exactly the same piece of chicken, the same size, the same weight, it's going to end up weighing it and measuring it. Maybe it'll come to interest, right? People might get more or less than the other person. Or no, maybe not, but like, the interest had to come from like what Hillel said yesterday about, if you lend a loaf of bread, then it might end up becoming different and the person's makbid on making sure he gets exactly the same amount. And, it'll come to all sorts of issues when you're super makbid like that. So yeah, Banu v'nevei sonami, so why aren't we concerned when it's in the context of his family? So the Gemara answers, Banu v'nevei hanu taima. Well, when it comes to his family, this is the reason why it's not an issue. You're allowed to lend money to family members with interest, right? In order to give them a taste for what interest is, right? A father is allowed to loan some money to his son with interest so that his son can learn about how evil interest is, and then he won't do it. So it's sort of so within that context, the father would be allowed to loan his child money. Now, Rashi also points out, because really this money is the father's anyways. I didn't exactly fully understand it, but something to the extent of basically it's not really ribis, it's not really interest. The father, I guess the assumption is that the child isn't necessarily working and making money, so anything that the father is giving the people in his house belongs to the father anyways. It's not really interest. So Rav Yehuda Marav is basically saying that within the context of a family, there really isn't any ribis concerns. And as Rashi then also points out, he extends that to say that also within the context of a family, people aren't like as makbid as they would be necessarily with other people. Like, if one kid gets a piece of chicken that's a little bit bigger than the rest, he might not like that and he might cry and be really annoying, but I guess it's not the same as like other people who are being makbid, or maybe we're just pretending like nobody would care about how big their piece of chicken is. Whatever it is, within the context of a family, we're not concerned that they're going to go bring out the scale and make sure that mamish, every single person gets the same exact size piece of chicken to make sure that nobody's getting ripped off, right? That is not necessarily a concern within a family. Okay, so if this is the case, mana gedola keneged mana ketana nami. Well, if that's the case, that we're not necessarily concerned about people getting different sizes of chicken within the family, well then, why do we say that you're only allowed to make lotteries when everything is the same exact size, but make sure that nobody gets a bigger one, nobody gets a smaller one? So the Gemara says, Enachinami. The Gemara says, you're right. It really doesn't actually make a difference. You're allowed to make a lottery at the Shabbos table for your family, whether the pieces are all the same size, whether they're different sizes. And the Mishnah is missing a few words. This is what it should say. A person can make a lottery within the context of his family at the Shabbos table. Even if you have, big pieces and small pieces, or maybe even if you have, barbecue chicken. One guy gets barbecue chicken, the other guy gets Rabbi Abba's chicken. Still it makes no difference. So that would be acceptable within the context of a family. My time, how come? It's like Rav Yehuda Marav, who says that there really isn't a concern about ribis, and I guess all these other things as well within the context of the family. Now that is only within the context of his family. But when it comes to other people, then you should not be, then they would not make lots. I mean, someone that's talking about these lots that are exactly the correct size, because then my time outcome could Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. It's like Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, who says that, people who are very makbid, they might end up like making, weighing it and do all that kind of stuff. Now, mana gedola keneged mana katana, and then when it comes to a big piece versus a smaller piece, af bechol la'acherim aser. Even during the week, it's not going to be allowed for other people. My time mishum kubya, because of like gambling. Meaning, if you have these people who are going to have like lotteries during the week, so somebody might get a bigger amount, somebody might get a smaller amount. So that's actually an issue of gambling, essentially, because what happens is, it's not, as Rashi points out, it's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, asmachta lo kanya, that basically when you gamble, right, let's say you have 5 people and 5 pieces of chicken, one is a big gishmaka piece of chicken, one is just like 1 bite. So what happens is, you're putting in your money hoping that you're going to get the big piece of chicken. When you get the short end of the stick and you get the 1 bite of chicken, you're going to regret, you didn't put in the money with that intention. And therefore, you're not really, what is it? Basically, the person who's getting the big piece is basically stealing, essentially, from the person who gets the little piece, because the person who got the little piece didn't really want to be giving that. He was assuming that he was going to get, he only put in his money assuming that he was going to get the big piece, right? When he didn't get the big piece, he doesn't actually really want to give it to the other person, so it's like a form of stealing. Okay, fine. Matilin chalashen al v'chulei. So we said that you are allowed to make lots for like korbanos, but not for manos, right? So I assume that what this means, I could be wrong, but I assume that what the kodshim is talking about is like, I don't know, let's say on Shabbos they have meat that they're eating, and they want to, do the Kohanim eat meat? Well, there's a korban tamid that they bring on Shabbos, maybe the korban musafin, or are those also olas? Unless maybe it's talking about the lotteries of like, that they would do like for the korbanos. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure. Does Rashi say anything? Or like, oh man, let's see, 1 second. Kuf mem chesem beis. Does he say anything there at the bottom? No. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you're allowed to do the lots for kudshim. Maybe for certain like kudshim meat that you can eat, but not for these manot. And Rashi in the Gemara says, "My avalo ala manot." What are these manot that they're not allowed to take lots for? So Amar of Yaakov, brother of Yaakov, avalo ala manos shel chol b'Yom Tov. Right. So kilu, if you have, let's say somebody yesterday, the day before Yom Tov, brought a korban shlamim. Now a korban shlamim, so the Kohanim get to eat some of the korban shlamim, or even a korban chatas or something like that. So, and now it's Yom Tov, and there were some korban shlamims from the day before. So then they would not be allowed to take lots to see who gets to eat what meat. Okay, or maybe it's like some kind of a shlamim korban that you bring on Yom Tov or something. So if it's brought on Yom Tov, so they would be allowed to take lots for that meat. But if it's from meat from the day before, then they wouldn't be allowed to take lots for the meat from the day before. Okay, fine. So Omar. So where are we? Fine. Pshita, that's obvious. Certainly they shouldn't be making lots on Yom Tov from meat from the day before. So since the pasuk says, V'amcha kimrive kohen, that your nation, right, when God is rebuking Israel in Hosea, he says that your nation is like a bunch of fighting Kohanim, i.e. the Kohanim fight a lot. So therefore, we might think that in order to prevent the Kohanim from fighting, we would allow them to take lots even for the meat of korbanos from the day before, so that they wouldn't fight about them. Afilu manos d'chol nami kamashmalan. So we might think that therefore even the portions from the day before you'd be allowed to take lots to prevent fighting, kamashmalan, that you can't, and if it leads to fighting, so be it. Rabbi Yaakov bra devas Yaakov, and says Rabbi Yaakov, the son of the daughter of Yaakov, if Shimon gets in trouble on account of Reuven, because of Reuven, Shimon gets in trouble, well, Reuven will not therefore enter in to the curtain of God, to the area where God is. Minalan, how do we know this? Well, if you're going to say, well, because the pasuk says in the context of Achav, that God said, who is going to lure Achav to go into war so that he will get killed? The Eibishter wanted to kill Achav. He was being very naughty, So God said to his angels, who will go in order to lure Achav to go into battle and get killed? V'yal v'yipo b'Ramos Gilad, and he'll go and he will fall in Ramot Gilad. Vayomer zeh b'cho v'zeh amar b'cho. So this angel said X, this other angel said Y. Vayetze aruach vayamod lifnei Hashem, and then a certain spirit came and stood before God. Vayomer ani afatenu v'gomer, and he says, look, I will lure Achav into going into battle. And then God asks him, how are you going to lure him into going into battle? Vayomer, and the spirit said, Eitze v'ayisi ruach sheker b'fi kol neviav. I will go and I will preach lies to all of Achav's prophets and advisors who will tell him to go into war and that he will be safe. Vayomer, and God said, Tfateh v'gam tuchal, go and lure Achav and you will succeed. Tseva aseken, go and do this. V'amrinan, and we say, my ruach, who is this spirit? What is this spirit? Rabbi Yochanan says, rucho shel navos. Rabbi Yochanan says this is the spirit of Navot. Now Navot was a fellow who owned a vineyard, and Achav wanted that vineyard. And basically Achav gave Navot an offer he couldn't refuse. And sure enough, Navos refused it nonetheless, and Achav therefore acted upon his offer and killed Navos. So therefore, Navos' spirit went and volunteered to lure Achav into battle and get killed. We might say, and so what does it mean when the pasuk says that God says, "Tzei, go out"? Amarav, tzei mim chitzasi. It means go out of where I am, go out of my area. Meaning that since Achav was going to get killed on account of Navos, God didn't want him with him. Vidilma hasam hainutama, but maybe over there the reason why Navos was sent out from God's mechitza is not because of the fact that Achav was going to get in trouble because of him. Rather, it's for a different reason. That somebody who speaks lies will not be able to live with me, right? And as Navos said, that he said that God asked him, how are you going to lure Achav into going to war? He says, well, I will, preach lies to his prophets. So rather, how do we know that somebody who gets somebody else in trouble cannot be with God? As the pasuk says by Nebuchadnezzar, Savaita kalon mikavod, that you were sustained with embarrassment instead of honor. Shesegam ata v'he'arel v'gomer. You shall also drink and become covered or uncircumcised. Savaita kalon mikavod ze Nebuchadnezzar. Now when the pasuk says that you have been satisfied with embarrassment, i.e. that you have been embarrassed, that is a reference to Nebuchadnezzar. Shesegam ata ve'arel zet tzidkiah. And you also drink and become considered uncircumcised, that is a reference to tzidkiah. And what we're saying is that because Nebuchadnezzar got embarrassed on account of tzidkiah, therefore tzidkiah could not, was considered like uncircumcised and could not be with God. Now, how did Nebuchadnezzar get embarrassed on account of tzidkiah? It is a very interesting anecdote that we are going to get to soon, which is basically Nebuchadnezzar, so he would go around kind of like defeating all these kings and stuff, and then he would take their king and he would kind of put them in jail, and then every day he would draw a lottery to see who he was going to sodomize. And basically when it came Tzidkiyahu's turn, so when it came to Tzidkiyahu's turn, well, something very peculiar happened, which was that Nebuchadnezzar's foreskin grew to be 300 amos, and that made sodomy very complicated. And not only did it make sodomy complicated, it was also very embarrassing for Nebuchadnezzar, because he was like Kilu at this party with all these people, and his foreskin was like taking up the whole room, and it was very uncomfortable for him. So because that happened because of Tzidkiyahu, right? Because of Tzidkiyahu, so therefore Tzidkiyahu was considered uncircumcised and not able to be with God. Very interesting story, right? So the Gemara says, yeah, but that's not really a good proof. The reason one why it's not a good proof is because the whole pasuk is talking about Nebuchadnezzar. It's not talking about Tzidkiyahu. Ve'od, Tzidkiya tzadika. And also, Tzidkiyahu was a tzaddik. My havale lemeabad le. Like, what was Tzidkiyahu supposed to do in that context? Right? Nebuchadnezzar was going to sodomize him. His foreskin got really big and weird. So, what did Tzidkiyahu do? So, he didn't do anything wrong. Tam Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rab, B'shash bikesh also Rasha lases loso tzaddik kach v'chule. Right? As Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rab, that at the time that Nebuchadnezzar wanted to sleep with Tzidkiyahu, etc. We are going to get to it soon. Okay. So rather from here, Gam enosh latzadik lo tov, right? So it says that Gam anosh latzadik, that if a tzaddik punishes somebody else, lo tov, it is not good for him. Ein lo tov ela ra. What does lo tov mean? It means bad. It means ra. Uchsiv ki lo kel chafetz resha ata lo yagurcha ra. And it says that you, God, are not a God that desires evil. No evil will live among you. Tzaddik ata Hashem v'lo yagur b'magurcha ra. That God, you are a tzaddik, and nobody will be able to, right? No evil will be able to live with you. And therefore, since it says that Gam enosh latzadik, Gam enosh or anosh, probably anosh, Gam anosh latzadik lo tov, right? So it says that if a tzaddik punishes somebody else, well, that's not good. Not good is bad. And it says bad can't live with God. So therefore, we learn that somebody who gets in trouble on account of somebody else, i.e. that Reuven gets Shimon in trouble, so Reuven can no longer be with God. Okay, the Gemara says, "My mashma dehai chalashim lishna defura hu." How do we know that chalashim in the Mishnah, when it says umatilin chalashin ala kachim, that you can make chalashim for the kachim? How do we know that this chalashim it means a lottery? So dichsiv, as the pasuk says, "Eich nafaltu mishamayim Hillel ben Shachar," that in the context of Nebuchadnezzar, it says, "Wow, how did you fall from the sky?" I.e., Nebuchadnezzar was at the top of the world. He was conquering all of the kings, sleeping with them. He was having a great life. But all of a sudden, he fell down from his great, where he was. Hillel ben Shachar, this morning star. Nagdaita la'aretz cholesh al goyim, and you have been cut down to the ground, the one who would take lots on the nations. Amar Rabba bar Hafuna, says Rabbi bar Hafuna, Melamed, it teaches, Shaymatul pur agdolei malchus, that he would take a lottery every day on the kings that he captured, Leda Eze ben Yomo Shomishkav Zachor, to see who he was going to sleep with that day. Uchziv, and it says in the pasuk, Komalchi Goyim Kulam Gomer. It says that all of the nations, when, right, it says Komalchi Goyim Kulam Shachvu B'Kavod Ish Bebeso, they all lied in honor, each in his own home. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan Shenachum Mishkav Zachor, that when Nebuchadnezzar fell from his glory, well, it was a great relief to all of these captured kings who no longer had to endure sodomy from Nebuchadnezzar. From Rabbi Yochanan, said Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Yamav shall also Russia, that all of the days of that Russia, of Nebuchadnezzar, Lo Nimtza Schok B'Feh Kol Birei, nobody was happy during that entire rule. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Nacha Shakta Kol Haaretz, that when Nebuchadnezzar sort of, came down from his glory, the entire land was quiet, patzchu rina, and then they rejoiced. Michlal dad hashta lo hava rina, implying that until then there was no rejoicing. V'amar Rabbi Yitzchak am Rabbi Yochanan asu lamad beveso shalosho Rasha, and says Rabbi Yitzchak in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that you're not allowed to stand in Nebuchadnezzar's house. How come? Shneimar, as the pasuk says, usiir mirak dusham, because the pasuk says that demons, shadim, will be dancing there, and if you go there, well then the shadim will go away. 2 people, right, shadim go away. Or 3 people, they dafa go, Gemara Brachos, right? 2 people, they stay and they don't see you, but 3 people, they go away. And you're not allowed to cause this shadim to go away because it says that the shadim have to dance over there. At the time that Nebuchadnezzar wanted to sodomize Tzidkiyahu, so Nimshcha or Laso Shloshmeos Ama, so his foreskin became 300 amos long, Vaisa Machzeres Akol Masiba Kula, and it was like all over the party, meaning they were at like a big party and everyone was having fun, and then all of a sudden like Nebuchadnezzar's foreskin was like all over the place, and it was really weird. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Savaita Kalon Mikavod, Shisegam Ata Ve Aril. So it says that you have been embarrassed rather than honored, and now drink this cup and become uncircumcised. Okay? Ariel b'gematria shlosh meos, and then Ariel in gematria is 300. That's how we know that his foreskin was 300 amos long. Wow. Shlosh meos have fine. V'amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab b'shah sheyarad osa Rosh leGehenim, when Nebuchadnezzar went down to hell. So Rosh kol yarad leGehenim, there was a whole to do in hell, and everyone's like, oh, Amru shemalim sha'aleim huba ole chalus k'mos muba, and they said, wait, is this nudnik? Is he coming to rule over us? That would be bad. Hell just got worse. Or maybe he's coming to be in hell just like everybody else is in hell. but not to rule against us. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Kamata chulesa kamonu elenu nimshalta. Right? They basically were asking, are you here to be in hell like us, or are you coming to rule against us? And then I guess they're crossing their fingers, hoping that he's just coming to be in hell like them. Yatzasa baskol v'amra, a voice from heaven came out and said, Mimino amta rida ve'hashkeva esa'erelim. So, and a voice came out from heaven and said, hey, little Nebuchadnezzar guy, you think that you're going to get off easy? Go and lie down with all the other people in hell. Eich Shavas Noges Shavsa Madheva, and it says about Bavel, how the taskmaster was sort of relieved from his duties, and Shavsa Madheva. What does it mean, Shavsa Madheva, that the Madheva went away? Amar Vyuda Marav Shavsa Uma, this nation that would say, She'amra midod ve'aveh, right? They would say, measure out your money and give it to us. So that nation who would say, measure out your money and give it to us, went away. V'yikad to those who say, She'amra me'od me'od haveh, that there are those who would say, bring lots and lots below midah without measuring, just bring infinite amounts. Urevu yatira husfas li, that the pasuk says by Nebuchadnezzar that, apparently he became an animal for 7 years, and then when he came back from being an animal, so it says that he got even greater powers. Amar Vyuda Amar Yirmiyah bar Abba, Melamed Shirachav al Ari Zachar, that Nebuchadnezzar rode on a male lion, V'kasher Tanin Barosho, and he tied a snake to the head of the lion. That sounds like a Vladimir Putin kind of thing. Putin or Putin? Putin, right? Sounds like a Vladimir Putin kind of thing. To be Mekayim, what the pasuk says, that God even gave the beasts of the field to serve Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, friends, that was Daf Kuf Mem Tes of Masechta Shabbos. We began with the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to read from your guest list on Shabbos. The question was why. So Rebbe by Abaye said, well, we're concerned that if you read from the guest list, you might find that you don't have enough food and you might erase people's names from it. Now Abaye says, and we're concerned that if you read from the guest list, then you might then go to read from other documents, and we don't want that either. What was the nafkamina? Ultimately, we said the nafkamina was if the guest list was written very high up on the wall. According to Rebbe, he is still concerned about erasing because he makes a low plug, says it doesn't matter that it's high up on the wall. Abai says, look, the fact of the matter is, if it's so high up on the wall, he's not going to erase it, and also he's not going to read other documents. Talking about looking into a metal mirror on Shabbos. The Tanna Kama says it's not allowed. You're not allowed to look into any mirrors. It's a low plug. Reb Meir says, look, if it's attached to the wall, then it's allowed because you're not going to trim your hair with it if it's attached to the wall. We talked about looking at murals. So we said, look, you're actually never allowed to look at artwork because you're not allowed to look at creative endeavors. But if you want to look at the caption of the artwork, that's a different story. During the week, that's fine. But on Shabbos, not, because we're concerned if you read that, you might read other documents, and that would be really, really bad. Can you draw lots on Shabbos? So we say basically if it's for your family, well then you can draw whatever lots you want. If it's not for your family, so then it depends. If it's on Shabbos, then you don't draw lots, particularly, especially if they're like the same size, because then you might come to measure and do all stuff like that. If it's during the week, well then you can't draw lots that are different in size, because then you have to worry about gambling and asmachta kanya, whatever, asmachta lo kanya, kilu. You think that you're putting in money assuming that you're going to win. When you don't win, it's basically like the person stealing from you. Then we had all sorts of interesting agaritas about Nebuchadnezzar and how evil he was, and sort of strange mysterious episodes that happened to him when he tried to sleep with Tzidkiyahu. Friends, that was Kuf Mem Tes of Masechta Shabbos. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you enjoy your day or night or whatever.